It's such an awesome feeling to be here with you. And let me start with congratulating each one of you for making the first step into entrepreneurship. You might be wondering, I haven't made that plunge, why are you congratulating me, right? Let me not answer that question right now. Through the presentation, I'll take you through why I tell you this is the first step towards entrepreneurship for each one of you. So today, I'm here to take you through the key to scaling up the business. And I'm sure the entire summit is about your ideas, dreams, and how to start up, right? So that's where I'm coming up with, after starting up, the next crucial stage is scaling up. So during the scale-up phase, what all are the key things to keep in mind, and what are the challenges are some of the things that I would be addressing through this session, especially with a key focus on how fortunate you guys are to be associated with this amazing ecosystem of Kerala put together by Kerala Startup Mission. So let's start with what are the key elements to scale up. So these are the key four elements that I'll be touching upon in today's session. The first element of scaling up is to have a definite goal. And when I talk about goal, your goal can even be reaching from this point to the entrance of this auditorium, right? Or it could be like reaching to the Silicon Valley to start your first business. It could be beyond. So what do you mean by setting a goal? There are two key elements in scale up when you look at keeping the goal that you have to keep in mind. One, plan or rather, set a goal without inhibition. You would have heard about, while starting up an entrepreneurship, you would have always heard about things like dream big, right? Why is dream a key word in the entire starting up or rather taking a new plunge? It's nothing but in dreams, we don't have any inhibition and limitation. So that's the starting point. So let me share an experience we had while running this company called, I used to anchor finance function and a few other functions for this startup called Taxi for Sure, which started in the year 2011 and got acquired for 1,300 crore capital in the year 2015. A short run of 4 years. And that's what I wanted to talk about in the first thing of the BHAG of the goal. When you talk about BHAG, let me come to that part of it. So in terms of the BHAG, there is something called Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal, which was first mentioned in the book called Built to Last by Jim Collins. That's nothing but a clear and compelling target for an organization, and that has to be huge enough. So let me take you back to this boardroom conversation we had once of Taxi for Sure days. Taxi for Sure was nothing but a ride-hailing app which started in 2011, as I mentioned. And in 2013, a day where we had 2 branches overall within India, and we were doing about 5,000 rides a day, we sat together to set a goal for the company. And we were 8 of us. Our CEO proposed, let's dream of the day when we are going to do 1 lakh rides. 4 of us were like, yay, that's the day we are dreaming about. 4 were like, from 5,000 to 1 lakh, what do you mean? And that's the day, then came, the initial thing was like, half of apprehension, half of us extremely excited. Then comes the next part of it. How do you take it into implementation? So they were like heated conversations about why 5K can't go to 1 lakh within, so probably we were talking about a timeline also of say 6 months. So there were apprehensions why it can't happen. There were apprehensions about what all needs to be done, about the limitations. So we kept one rule. Let's take all the limitation out of the window and now start thinking about how do we achieve this? So we set the goal that day. And we still called it Big Hack. Yes, it was really a big, hairy, audacious goal at that point in time. And the fact was that barely 6 months within the time we took this decision, we were almost close to that goal. Within a month's time, we almost tripled. Within 2 months, we almost became 5x of what we were at that point in time. That gave most of the people the confidence that this is not a random goal, but this is something which is achievable. So now coming to, look at SpaceX. SpaceX, I'm sure, is a company with which anybody who aspires to be an entrepreneur would have gone through their journey, right? To enable human exploration and settlement on Mars. This is a goal. Look at the kind of dream that people dream about. So this is a starting point. This is a starting point, in fact, for scaling up. If your dream is 2 and other branches, it's not about, huge scale up, but that's also a choice. I'm not telling that this is the only way to go about doing it. But since we are considering about scale up, and that's what all our dream is all about, let's go with the big, hairy, audacious goal. The next one is the goal alone cannot, and another key thing that you need to keep in mind is, since I touched upon your goal can be audacious, it can also be a happy one, which is where if you have asked yourself the question, what goal did I start my journey with? And if you say that it's not becoming, going to the Mars, or it's just creating an impact right next to me in the 10-kilometer radius, so be it. So it's very important that your goal is a happy one as well. So a goal without the next step in scaling up, a plan, is almost useless. So there are 2 things that you need to keep in mind for planning. So one is, your plan should be to innovate, and your plan should be broken down into the aspects to reach to your goal. Let me go back to the previous example, wherein I mentioned about a 5,000 to a lakh. So that planning, or rather, scale up to that kind of level, doesn't just like that come overnight. So let me tell you the inhibitions. When 4 of us told that this is just not a possible goal, the limitations we saw were, we don't have the capital to do that. We don't have the people to do that. We are talking about 2 cities within the country that we are present in. We at least need to be in 80 to 100 cities for this to happen. And how? How will this happen over the next 6 to 8 months? So now started the planning part of it, which is where we started breaking it down into goals. How did I get to, or rather, how did we get to this stage of, or rather, the thought of, I need 100 branches to get there? That is where you do your research. Morning we heard about that, right? Do your research so well for your industry, the sector that you are playing in, and figure out the goal that you want to go to. So that's where we figured out, for us to do this, and if we have picked this particular geography and the potential, these are the number of cities we need to present in. If that be the case, now when we look within and see, do we have the kind of organization structure, the people, all of that to do it, capital to do it? That's where, half of them were so apprehensive. So now, we got down to the stage wherein we took all the department heads, who were believers, non-believers, all of them, and said, if we agree to disagree, and then we are daring to dream to reach a 1 lakh per day, what is it that we are planning to do over the next 6 months? So that starts from day 1. That's why for every day for a startup, it's day 1 for everyone who is running it. We went back to the drawing board, figured out, if this has to be one single goal, what has to be the resources required by each department that should come up to touch this goal? So that brings me to So, that brings me to the next one, mobilize the resources. So when I talk about resources, traditionally, the key thing used to be, our thinking used to be, capital is the biggest resource you require to scale up or even build a business, right? Gone are those era, wherein capital was the mono-capitalism was the word. Today, it's the era of multi-capitalism. When I talk about multi-capitalism, what do we mean by that? So the multi-capitalism, what I mean to say is that capital in terms of currency comes as the last resort for you guys. Anytime when you are thinking of starting up, think of currency, not as a limiting factor, but as a last resort. The first resource, I would say, is your brand. Focus on building the brand. So in fact, let me go back to the first part of when you should be deciding on scaling up. So that's the point where your idea, you have at least validated and seen that the product is working great. There is a need for it. And then you are ready to take the plunge to really take it and tell the masses that this is what I have done. Now come and experience what I have in store for you. So once we have gone beyond this stage, the key thing in terms of capital is to create a brand about what you have done and about you. That should become your biggest capital. So if you look at it, no other company and person in the recent era have created a beautiful brand like the way this man did, right? And he is an inspiration for most of us. Attention is the new currency in business. So that's where brand comes into picture. An Apple logo, I don't think anybody who even talks about business wouldn't recognize an Apple's logo. And majority of us would recognize this man as well. I need not even put his name around, right? So that's the power of the brand capital. Then comes the capital of your relationship. So the capital of relationship, when I talk about the capital of relationship, it's extremely important to think about whom do you sell to. People do not buy goods and services. They buy relations, stories, and magic. This is where money doesn't become your primary thing. It's about people who are going to consume your product, who are in the thick of the problem, and they are looking for, somebody who can solve it for them. You being the curious lot who figured out the problem and was creative enough to, or rather, dare to dream to see that you can solve for that, that's where relationships come into picture. Let me touch upon how in the current organization, the relationships and even, the forum who is responsible or rather, who is behind this awesome conclave, Kerala Startup Mission was instrumental in giving us this kind of trust as well. So in business, it's all about whom you know, what kind of network effect you have, and for you to figure out the opportunities. And this is precisely the point where I said, you guys have taken your first plunge into entrepreneurship. If after all the awesomeness of today's inspiration that you would be going through right from the morning that you are listening about entrepreneurship and about creating companies, if you don't get inspired, nothing else would, right? So that's where the day you chose to be here in this conclave and to listen to what it takes to get an idea to industry and to scale up, you have taken the choice of treading this path. That's where I said a big congrats to each one of you. Kerala Startup Mission is one of the great organizations and in coordination with Kerala government. Across, I've been in the startup ecosystem for the last 9 years. across various states, this is one of the great initiatives that I've seen from a government-led initiative which puts together ecosystems so very well and connects people to businesses. So, now coming to the currency capital. Currency capital is also, so in fact, we are the benefactors, even on the currency capital from the Kerala government. Initially, when we had the dream of setting this up, and when we got the pre-series A from a fund which was like, there was a backing of the government as well, we got from there is where we grew to this today's scale of 1,000 crore plus valuation company with around 150 people that we are today in the last 2.5 years. That's where I want to stress upon the point of leveraging relationships and ecosystem. I wouldn't discount too much the currency capital, though I wanted to emphasize on the multi-capitalism era this is and the importance of all other channels that comes into picture. Currency capital is important only after the previous meticulous stage of going through a planning process, which is driven on scale and on innovation as we spoke about. But from there, the deduction should also be that the currency capital do you require for crashing your time to go to market or to capture the market, or even with a beautiful product you have in mind that you require this money to, buy other businesses or buy out other, maybe it's a kind of acquisitions that you would require. All of this should flow from a very, very detailed, meticulous planning part of it. And the last but not the least, I would also stress upon another biggest capital in terms of resource mobilization that you would require, which is failure. I'm sure you wouldn't have looked at it from a capital point of view. But this is one of the biggest capital to become an entrepreneur and to scale up. When I talk about failure, it's not in the essence of whether you consider yourselves to be a failure or not. This is, we talk about failed businesses, we talk about failed initiatives. I talk about that failure, which is an extremely subjective word. But when it comes to starting up, I would say it is a capital which has got an extremely high positive spin to it. If you guys haven't failed enough, you haven't dared enough. And the difference between dreaming, just being a dreamer, and an achiever, the path is defined by the number of plunges you have taken and the number of failures you have faced. If you lack on that capital, trust me, no currency will be in a position to take you to a larger scale. Dare to fail, dare to try. And there comes, after all of this comes, the final part of it, which is measuring. So we've gone through this, and this is where, on the measure part of it. So this is the reality check of all that we have discussed till now. In measure, it's not about a one-time process, it's going to be a continuous process. It starts right from the goal, wherein you break it down, you have a higher goal. For example, when we talk about, in the initial introduction, it was mentioned about our current venture, which is Open Financial Technologies. What we do is a neobank. We could have an audacious goal, or rather that's what we have. Dream of the day when we see open being the currency across. Whether that's crazy, yes, we want to be crazy enough. But whether that's possible by tomorrow, we know that it's definitely not. Because there's a long way in terms of breaking that goal into smaller, easily measurable and achievable smaller goals with a milestone. And planning, one comes with the entire roadmap, and second, it also comes with stage-wise, milestone-driven roadmap to it. Then we go back to mobilize the resource for each of these stage, and we again come to the measuring part of it. Let me draw your attention back to a stellar comment from Jerai. I'm sure most of you would relate to what this is. For 800 years have I trained, Jerai. My own counsel will I keep on who is to be trained. After 800 years also, there is still a consideration. What should I do? How should I do? What more to do? Stay ahead, innovate. That's the only way that you don't stagnate. We have seen ample businesses which go out of business because someone else disrupted, because the dreams were cut off halfway through, because you didn't do the reality check. While it's important to dream, while it's important to start, while it's important to scale up, it's critical, essential, and for survival, it's essential to have a road to stay ahead. I would say innovate. For that, the only tool is measure and reroute. Once again, congratulations to each one of you. And let me remind you, dream big. And if you have a passionate dream, the entire universe will conspire to get it for you. May the force be with you. And thank you so much for listening.